What if the most terrifying thing that ever happened to you wasn't a nightmare? What if it was Tuesday afternoon, a gas station, a knock on the door, a shadow that shouldn't exist? Every single story you're about to hear tonight is real. These are not actors. These are not scripts written in a dark room for entertainment. These are people, ordinary, breathing people, who walked into the wrong moment and barely made it back to tell you about it. I'm your host, and welcome to Neurofear HQ, where the horror doesn't live in the movies. It lives in the spaces between the ordinary moments of your life. The parking lot at 2 a.m, the attic above your bedroom, the man who offered you a ride home. Before we begin, drop a comment right now telling us where in the world you're watching from. We have listeners from every corner of the globe. And tonight, no matter where you are, I need you to make sure your doors are locked. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. These stories come out regularly, and you don't want to miss a single one. Now, turn off the extra lights. Get comfortable. And whatever you do, don't go outside alone. Here are tonight's accounts from the Neurofear HQ archives. Story 1. The Craigslist Mistake. Early 2014. A young man, just 18 years old, sits in front of a glowing screen, scrolling through the personal section of Craigslist. He's fresh out of high school, naive in the way only the young can be. He responds to an ad. A woman begins texting him. She mentions a Red Roof Inn. She mentions donations. He doesn't think anything of it. He's 18, and as he freely admits himself, he's stupid. The morning of the meetup, he leaves his house as if heading to his GED class. Walks to the motel instead. It's pouring rain. Warm and heavy. By the time he arrives, his clothes are drenched and clinging to him. He knocks. She answers. Notices her attire. Notices it enough that alarm bells should ring. But they don't. He's 18. He asks to use the shower. She agrees. He steps in, strips off his soaked clothes. When he emerges, wrapped in a towel, she's sprawled across the bed watching television. He looks at her. She looks at him. Donations are due, she says. Up front. And in that single moment, every single red flag that should have gone off over the last 24 hours detonates simultaneously behind his eyes. His face falls. He turns toward the television. He tells her, voice quiet and flat, that he doesn't have any money. She explodes. His clothes and bag come flying at him. He dresses fast, actually apologizes for wasting her time, and walks out into the parking lot. He's almost clear of the property when a green car pulls alongside him. The driver calls out. He tries to walk past. The driver shouts. He walks over. The man in the driver's seat looks rough, weathered. His left arm rests on the door. His right arm hangs down at his side. And in that hand, pointed casually toward the earth, is a pistol. The young man is certain he is about to die. So why'd you come here? The man says slowly, knowing you don't have any money. He explains, as calmly as his body allows. He wasn't aware of the situation. He hadn't promised anyone money. The man raises his arm slightly, just enough, letting the barrel catch the light. He says he has text messages proving otherwise. The young man knows that's a lie. He never mentioned money to anyone. A long silence passes between them. Then the man lowers the weapon, looks at him with something between contempt and grudging respect. You're lucky, he says. You came to one of my girls. Other girls? They'd have stabbed you with a broken crack pipe. You're young. This is your warning. He motions for him to leave. The young man walks away. He doesn't run, but every few steps he glances back over his shoulder, checking and making absolutely certain that no one is raising that arm behind him. He never went back to Craigslist, not once, not ever. Story 2, the subway gunman. He works security at a university, open campus, heart of the city, bad area, 6 years on the job. And in those 6 years, he'd never once seen a real gun on duty. That changed on a Tuesday morning at approximately 10 a.m. He's walking the 3-block gap between Building A and Building B when something catches his eye through the glass front of a Subway sandwich shop. And because the entire front of the store is glass, floor to ceiling, nothing hidden, he sees it perfectly. An armed robbery in progress. He stops walking, not by choice. His body simply stops. And then the armed robber turns, makes eye contact through the glass, and raises the handgun directly at his face. He nearly loses control of his bladder. His words, not mine. One of the employees creates a distraction. The urge, robber turns. He runs. He rounds the corner. He radios for police. The first car arrives in under 5 minutes. By the time the officer sees what's happening inside, 5 more squad cars materialize out of the air, and a fully equipped SWAT officer arrives on scene like something from a movie. They have the building surrounded. The gunman looks outside, sees what's waiting for him, and makes a choice. He lets 8 hostages go, keeps 1 employee, and then, at gunpoint, he forces her to make him 2 12-inch submarine sandwiches. He uses the barrel of the weapon to point at his preferred vegetables. Jalapenos, extra olives, whatever he wants. The security guard watches this from outside, half horrified and half unable to believe what he's seeing. The sandwiches are made. The woman is released. The robber locks the door, takes his food, sits down at a table with his back to the glass, and begins to eat his meal. SWAT teams are positioned at every exit. Snipers possibly on the roof. A dozen armed officers waiting for the signal, and inside, a man eating a footlong, completely unbothered. They break the door down after he finishes 1 sandwich. He is taken into custody. That was the same shift, incidentally, on which the security guard later approached a man stealing a bicycle. He asked him to stop. The man reached into his clothing, produced a knife approximately the size of a small sword, and jabbed it in his direction. "Bike is yours," the guard said, and he walked away. He did call the police, but he walked away. He says, these are the moments that make him love his job. Story 3, the attic above the staircase. She was 14 years old, the Philippines, a traditional old bungalow, 1-story coconut-polished wooden floors, and a staircase that rose immediately to the right of her bedroom door, leading up to a sweltering, little-used attic. Every single time she left her room, she would open the door and face that staircase, and every time she'd feel it. The unreasonable, irrational, but persistent certainty that something was going to come crawling down from up there. Her grandparents had to leave that night. Airport pickup. Traffic in Manila being what it is, they'd need to leave at 7 in the evening and wouldn't be back until 5 in the morning at the earliest. A 14-year-old girl alone in a gated community with guard dogs. She told them she'd be fine. She finished the dinner dishes. She'd noticed the neighbor dogs barking, loudly, continuously, but she dismissed it. Dogs always bark. She locked every door, every window. She turned off every light. She went to her room. Everything was normal. Anime posters on the walls. Closet untouched. Bed against the barred, tinted windows. Bars installed because her uncle used to sneak out, tinting for her privacy. She turned off the light. And there he was, a silhouette, illuminated by the streetlight outside, of a man, thick, curly hair, slim build, standing at her window. She turned the light back on. He disappeared, turned it off. He returned. On, gone, off, back. She double-locked her bedroom door, both locks. She climbed into bed. The dogs outside kept barking. She was almost asleep when she heard something above her, in the attic, movement, the sound of furniture shifting. She told herself it was rats. She hugged her pillow, just rats. These were heavy rats. Rats that pushed furniture. And then they stopped. And then footsteps, hurried, coming down the stairs, stopping at the bottom, right outside her door. She felt sick. She got up and shaking and pressed herself against the door, making no sound, willing herself invisible. The doorknob turned, clicked. Then pressure, someone pushing from outside, finding resistance, pushing harder. She didn't scream. She didn't want him to know she was there. He stopped. She stood frozen against the door, waiting. Footsteps retreated up the stairs. She exhaled. Then the shadow appeared again at the window. She forced herself not to look. She doesn't remember what happened after. She thinks exhaustion took her. In the morning, over breakfast, she mentioned casually that she'd heard footsteps in the attic. Her grandmother scoffed. Rats, she said. She never brought it up again. But she knows, the attic window had been open. The neighbor's dogs, not her own, had been closest to her window. And there was nothing outside that window that could have cast the shape of a man. Story 4. 29 times. Christmas Day, 2013. Edinburgh, Scotland. An elderly resident named Alan Williamson hears loud banging on his apartment door. He's had trouble with a neighbor for months. Escalating, disturbing trouble. But it's Christmas. He thinks of how lonely the day can be. He opens the door. The only thing waiting for him is death. The person on the other side attacked him with a 6-inch kitchen knife, stabbing him 29 times. By the time it was over, Alan Williamson was dead on the floor of his own apartment, in a pool of his own blood. Other residents heard the commotion and called the police. Officers arrived to find Alan, and a trail of blood leading from his apartment to another unit in the same building. The door was unlocked. They entered. Inside, covered in blood and in a state of frenzy, they found 37-year-old Melissa Young. They asked if she had just stabbed the man in the apartment across the hall. She said yes. And then she told them something that stopped every officer in that room cold. The power it gave me, she said, was amazing. She blamed him for provoking the attack. He had rejected a Christmas present, a pair of sneakers she'd bought him. He didn't like the colors. She'd argued they were unisex. He insisted she keep them. That rejection had simmered in her for days. And on Christmas morning, it boiled over. A toxicology report confirmed she had traces of 4 different illegal drugs in her system at the time of her arrest, along with a blood alcohol level that would have made it illegal for her to operate a vehicle. A doctor testified during her trial that she was an alcoholic prone to dangerous violent outbursts, that she inhaled solvents daily, was prescribed 14 different medications, and had smoked heroin the morning of the murder. It also emerged that earlier that same year, she had abducted and held Alan at knife point for several hours after falsely believing he had stolen her house keys. He escaped only by jumping from the first-floor balcony of her apartment into the garden below. During the trial, Melissa claimed the archangel Saint Michael had entered her body and used her as an instrument of divine punishment. The judge was not moved. "You showed no remorse," he told her during sentencing. "In fact, you told this court you were indifferent to his death." She was sentenced to serve at least 20 years before becoming eligible for parole. While awaiting trial, she attacked a female prison officer, dragging her to the floor by the hair, lying on top of her, biting her stomach hard enough to draw blood. She received an additional 6 months. Former colleagues described a woman who had been bullied severely as a teenager, who had descended into addiction, religious obsession, and paranoia. A man who once employed her recalled hearing her playing with a carving knife in her apartment. "I could kill them all," she told him. He'd thought she was just looking for attention. Story 5. The Fake Santa. She was driving her 2 children home from their grandparents' house a week before Christmas. Her son was 5, a true believer. Her daughter had just turned 9 and was beginning to sense the edges of the truth, that wobbling age where they want to believe even as the logic slowly fails them. Then the hand-painted signs appeared on the roadside. Santa's Grotto, 9 miles. The children went absolutely ballistic. She refused, then capitulated, because she wanted her daughter's belief to last just a little longer. Because once the oldest knows, it's only a matter of time before the youngest does too. The signs led her down a long, dark dirt track. 5 minutes of nothing. Then, a porta-cabin. A handful of caravans parked around it. No other families. No decorations to speak of. Barely even a string of lights. She had a bad feeling from the moment she stepped out of the car. She knocked on the porta-cabin door. No answer. She knocked again. Then one of the caravan doors swung open and a heavy-set older man with a gray beard stuck his head out and stared at her, through her, with eyes that seemed to hold nothing behind them at all. "I'll go fetch him," he finally said. He returned wearing what she can only describe as the worst Santa costume she'd ever seen in her life. No white felt trim, no belt, just a collection of mismatched red clothing, a cheap hat and pants covered in grease stains, and what appeared to be cigarette burns. He led the children into the porta-cabin. Inside, the lights were strings of cheap Christmas bulbs, red and green, that bathed everything in a strobing, hellish glow. Mounted on one wall was an old sheep skull with plastic deer antlers taped to the top of it. Thus, Santa sat down on a grubby couch that smelled of old urine and alcohol. Neither child moved. The exchange was awkward, stilted. She prompted the children to speak. She ushered them out as soon as she reasonably could, and then a hand grabbed her arm. Hard. Fingers digging into the crook of her elbow, she turned to find his face inches from hers. The stench of cigarettes and hard liquor, his eyes gleaming. 50 quid, he hissed. She explained politely that she hadn't brought cash. She kept up the pretense, promising brandy and mince pies on Christmas night, God knows why. He growled, word she's choosing not to repeat here. She pushed the children toward the car. And then she realized Santa was not alone. He had never been alone. From the other caravans, a group of people filed out, surrounding her path back to the car, chanting, "Where do you think you're going and you haven't paid?" She reached for her purse to see what she had. A child, an actual child, snatched the entire purse from her hands and ran back toward the caravans while the adults cheered him on. She got into her car and drove away. The damage control took weeks. Her daughter's belief in Father Christmas never recovered. Her son needed repeated reassurance that the man was simply a bad person pretending to be Santa, that the real Santa had most certainly placed him on the naughty list. She says to this day it was the most terrifying Christmas-related experience of her life. Worse, she adds, than her first Christmas with her mother-in-law. Story 6. Something in the Boundary. Waters Summer. 2012. The Boundary Waters. That vast ancient wilderness of lakes and forest straddling northern Minnesota and southern Ontario. He's working as an expedition canoe guide for the Boy Scouts. 9 people in his group, 6 scouts, 2 adult supervisors, and himself. The route changes when the boys can't handle the physical demands of a 200-mile paddle. To compensate, he takes them somewhere special, a waterfall called Eddy Falls, rare in that flat country. A decision, he says, that would put them directly in the path of something. He's collecting firewood in a dense tangle of downed trees and brush, the falls audible somewhere to his left. When it happens, a scream. Not a human scream, not an animal scream. Something he has no word for. It stops him dead, physically freezes his muscles. He can't move. The second scream is closer, the third, closer still. By the fourth, he can feel it in his chest. His body responds before his mind does. He opens his mouth and something comes out of him that he has never produced before or since. A bark. Involuntary, raw. The fifth scream nearly hurts, and it breaks the spell. He runs back to camp. His crew heard it too. He tells them it was a boar. There are no boars in that region, and the adult supervisors know it immediately, but they don't call his bluff. Dinner happens. The boys go to their tents. He sets up his hammock 50 yards from camp, head height, about 6 feet off the ground, with a tarp loosely draped over him against the morning dew. Somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning, he wakes to the sound of a woman sobbing. Not crying, sobbing. Quiet and rhythmic. Something is moving through the brush past his feet. He hears it cross from brush to granite and continue toward him. Heavy footfalls, deliberate. By the time he registers it, it is standing directly beside his hammock. He can hear its breathing. Loud, congested. A thick animal sound. He can smell it. Musk, overwhelming, wild. He can feel its presence, enormous, only inches from his body, and then he acts. He throws the tarp off his face and his left hand makes contact. He touches it in the chest. In the dark, he can make out a large, upright figure. The hair on it is long and coarse. The frame is massive. He touches pectoral muscle. It bolts. Through dense brush, moving at a speed that makes no sense for something that large in that terrain. By the time his headlamp is on, nothing. He reads until dawn and tells no one. They move camp the next day. That evening, one of the adult supervisors visits the camp toilet, returns less than 2 minutes later still pulling up his pants. White-faced, shaking. He saw something run in front of him. Not a bear. He's hunted bears for years. He says it was a monkey, about 9 feet tall. They don't sleep. They night paddle instead, several miles by headlamp, trying to put distance between themselves and whatever is out there. In the middle of a narrow channel of water, dark woods pressing in on both sides, a rock the size of a baseball comes flying out of the tree line and narrowly misses their lead canoe. There is no cliff, no natural source. It was thrown, deliberately and with force. They paddle until they reach open water, tie the canoes together, sit in the middle of the lake all night. When they return to base camp the next day, another guide named Justin has just come back from the same region. He has that look, the 1,000-yard stare. He tells them everything had been fine until the Knife Lake and Newfound Lake area that they'd been messed with for several nights, that a rock had been thrown at them in the exact same channel. For 2 weeks, crews keep coming back from that area with identical accounts. Screams, rocks, sightings of massive upright figures. Then one night in the staff lodge, when the stories are flying around the room, he hears a quiet chuckle from the back corner. One of the veteran guides, a man who's been working the boundary waters for over a decade. "It's about time," he says. "Somebody else seen one." He's been encountering them for 10 years, he tells them. And then he says something that stops the room entirely. "They talk to me." Not in language, telepathically. He says the less you acknowledge them, the less they bother you. But they can read you. Read human emotion as clearly as words on a page. And they know our species, he says, better than we know ourselves. He adds one final thing, almost as an aside. They like it when you're afraid. It's a game to them. Story 7, Sashakt, the man in the attic. He's 24. Works nights at a factory. Gets home around 8 in the morning. Lives alone in a small bungalow with an attic, roughly 5 by 5 meters, accessible only through a ceiling hatch. One Thursday, coming home from his shift during a heavy storm, he goes straight to sleep. When he wakes, he checks his notifications. His Ring camera, positioned at his front door, has been triggered at 7:42 in the morning. He got home between 8:10 and 8:15. He checks the footage. A man, pressed against the door, working the handle. 10 seconds of it until he spots the camera. Then he scuttles away quickly, like something that knows it's been seen. It unsettles him. But he rationalizes. He makes food. In the kitchen, his back door is open. He tells himself he left it that way, spends the rest of the day talking himself out of each small thing that doesn't seem right. By 9 that evening, he's almost convinced himself. And then, out of the corner of his eye, the attic hatch begins to move, slowly. Being slid open from above, he questions his own sanity. Then, fingers appear. Curling around the edge of the hatch, pushing it further, he runs for his bedroom. The moment he starts moving, he hears the hatch get nearly torn off its housing. Fast, violent, sudden. He reaches his bedroom door, glances back down the corridor, and sees the hatch fully open, a rectangle of pure black in the ceiling, and 2 human hands, gripping the edges, suspended above him. He shouts that he's calling the police and that he has a gun. The hands slip back into the darkness, and the man drops down. He slams his door, locks it, gets through to emergency services. The dispatcher tells him to stay on the line. He hears the man walk to his bedroom door, rattle the handle, then move to the kitchen. Cupboards opening, things moving, the sounds of someone making themselves at home. And then, sirens. The man was a local homeless individual, armed, police confirmed, with a knife from his own kitchen. He'd been active in the area, attempting to access other homes. They also determined he had been inside before, multiple times. He still sleeps with his bedroom door locked, a knife under his pillow, windows sealed regardless of the season. He says he posted the story because writing it down makes it feel more like a story and less like something that actually happened to him. He's not sure it's working. Story 8. Room 2, 135. She works overnight at an upscale hotel, 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning. Alone. She's been there 5 years. About 3 hours into her shift, the phone rings. Room 235. The voice on the other end is quiet, raspy, slightly accented. He can't figure out how to use the volume control on the television remote. She offers to explain over the phone. He insists she come to the room. She's 5 foot tall, baby-faced, mid-20s, working alone in a hotel with a guest base that has recently shifted. Pandemic pricing bringing in a different clientele than usual. She tells him if he comes down to the lobby, she'll show him gladly. He complains. Bad customer service. What kind of hotel wouldn't send someone to the room for something this simple? She gives in. 1 floor up, couldn't take long. She knocks, announces herself. And through the door, she hears him talking to someone. Murmured. Low, as if giving instructions. She waits. Debates, knocking again. Then the deadbolt slowly unlatches. The door opens, barely an inch. Just a crack, all the lights in the room are off. The only illumination is the television, volume muted, casting a pale, shifting glow across the darkness. From behind the door, completely hidden, disembodied, his voice. Come on in, sweetie. She doesn't move, she doesn't speak. Come on, he says again, edgier this time. Come inside. She pushes the door open slightly and reaches for the light switch just inside the frame. The room floods with light. She sees him for the first time. 60-something, white-haired, slim with a soft gut, shirtless, belt undone, ends hanging loose. She doesn't look directly enough to be certain, but she believes his pants are unzipped as well. He's alone. 1 small black duffel bag, the only piece of luggage in the room. He claims he doesn't understand the remote. She attempts to explain from the doorway. He backs further into the room. Says it would be easier if she just came inside. She doesn't. She makes it through the night. Her boss later apologizes and makes clear that no front desk employee should ever enter a guest room alone. She says no one made her feel like she had to. She'd made the call herself because it seemed like it would be quick. She knows better now. She stayed in her locked office with security cameras until dawn, watching every angle. She had already decided if he came to the desk, she was calling the police immediately. He didn't come to the desk. Story 9. The pizza robbery. She's 27, delivers pizza for a chain, makes good money, company car, all white sedan with the logo printed on the side. It's important to remember, important to the car. Double order tonight, both cash. The first goes without incident, a generous tip. She drives to the second location, an apartment complex she's delivered to before. Sun just setting, still light out. She grabs the order and heads for the building entrance. A young guy comes out. An older, larger man was outside smoking. He goes back inside as she approaches. The young guy looks around, nervous, asks what he owes her. The hairs on the back of her neck stand up immediately. He says the price isn't what he was told on the phone. She feels someone step out of the building behind her. She tells him the amount again. Breaks down the order item by item, trying to keep her voice steady. And then, cold metal at her right temple and a poke at the center of her spine. 2 gunmen. She couldn't speak. Words wouldn't form. Give me your money and your keys. Now. She fumbles for the keys, gives them her cash, doesn't realize until later that the $50 tip from the first delivery is mixed in. A third man materializes on her left and grabs the pizza bag. The one behind her she still hasn't seen. The young one searches the company car. Then, her phone. And something in her breaks. Pictures of her 5-year-old son are on that phone. Months of moments she hasn't backed up. She starts to beg. She tells them her son died and it's all she has of him. It's a lie. Her son is alive and healthy, but she says it anyway. And the voice from behind her, and the one she still hasn't seen, says softly, "Trust me, just listen to him. He'll get it back undamaged. I don't want to be here either." His voice sounds like he's been crying. A car pulls into the complex. The 3 boys sprint away. The one behind her, running last, drops his gun on the pavement directly in front of her, silver and black, safety off. He scoops it up and disappears. She collapses. The woman who pulled in sees her, takes her inside, locks the door, holds her phone steady so she can call for help because her hands are shaking too badly to do it herself. The police arrive. The boys, already caught. Arrested less than 20 minutes after the robbery, speeding, matching the description exactly. They used the money to buy fuel and marijuana. They had at least 15 stolen phones on them. Her phone was in the box. She picks it up and doesn't take anything else. She points out the one who was behind her, the youngest, barely 16, and she asked the officers to go easy on him. He was the only one who confessed. He seemed like a good kid who didn't want to be there. They do. He gets 6 months of house arrest. The one who held the gun to her temple, 18 years old, gets 8 years. He's getting out this coming February. Early release. Overcrowding, not good behavior. She says she's ready. Everyone who needs to know his face knows his face. She hopes they don't meet again. Story 10. The station wagon on the forest road. It was 2003 or 2004. She was 13, maybe 14. A camping trip with her mother, stepfather, and 4 younger siblings. A familiar campsite. One they'd visited before. 10 miles into the woods by bicycle. The roads out there are dirt tracks, barely accessible, unsuited for anything but bikes and official forest ranger vehicles. In all the times they'd camped there, they had never encountered another vehicle on those trails. Until that day. They hear it first, coming up behind them slowly. Her stepfather pulls them aside. His voice carries a note she doesn't recognize. Not quite fear yet, but something adjacent to it. Something cautious. The vehicle passes. It's not a ranger's 4x4. It's a station wagon. Long-bodied, civilian, completely out of place. In the rear window visible through the glass, several large black bin bags, tightly tied, fully sealed. Nothing visible inside. The driver looks rough. Mean, she says, not as a judgment but as a gut observation. Dark clothes, short hair. He doesn't stop, doesn't ask for directions. He drives like a man who knows exactly where he's going. Her stepfather says nothing, but she can see him thinking. The car continues ahead of them and stops. For what feels like an enormous amount of time, nothing happens. They simply sit there, watching it. Then, the reverse lights come on. The car begins backing toward them. Her stepfather's voice changes completely. Run. They abandon the bicycles. They flee through the trees on foot, dragging the bikes with them until they reach a railway bridge they'd crossed earlier. They never look back. They don't know if the man got out of the car. They don't know if he followed. They never speak about it. Not for years. She says she never found out what was in those bags. She never found out who he was or where he was going. and she admits it's possible the explanation is completely mundane. But her stepfather's face when those reverse lights came on, that she cannot explain away. He was not a man who frightened easily, and he was frightened. Story 11, The Gray-Haired Man. She was 18 years old, married 6 months. A tiny one-bedroom house rented directly across the street from the bank where she worked as a teller. She'd grown up in the country, raised to trust people, raised to see the good in the world. She had a cold. She took medicine. She went to bed early. She was half asleep when she felt someone touch her. Her fogged mind assumed it was her husband. She reached toward him, and her hand found him on the other side of the bed, facing away from her, completely asleep. She turned. At the foot of the bed, illuminated by the street light coming through the window, crouched a gray-haired man, staring directly at her. She screamed. Her husband spun toward her. The man bolted out through the bedroom door, which was right beside her husband's side of the bed. Her husband saw nothing. He told her she'd had a nightmare. She refused to lie back down. They walked into the living room. The front door was propped open with a brick. The rocking chair had been moved from the doorway to create a clear path between the entrance and the bedroom. Her purse had been emptied across the floor, a few dollars missing. Her Social Security card, a change purse, a photograph. No cell phones existed yet. No home phone either. They couldn't afford one. They were pulling on shoes when they heard a car door close outside. She screamed, "My God, he's stealing our car." Her husband went to the door. A female officer was walking toward the house. She had found a man running suspiciously across the street, stopped him for public intoxication. As he got into the back of her patrol car, he'd been trying to stuff a change purse into his pocket. She reverse searched the Social Security number inside. It came back to an address 1 road over. The man's fingerprints were matched. His hands tested for DNA. He was prosecuted. Among the charges, aggravated sexual assault and battery, breaking and entering, theft. During the investigation, police searched his camper. Parked, it turned out, directly in front of the bank where she worked as a teller. She'd been walking past it every single day. She had been walking to and from work, alone, for a month. Items from her home were found inside the camper. He had been inside her house before, multiple times. The prosecution revealed that he had seen her husband in the bed beside her, had walked around him, to her side. He had been on a mission. 4 or 5 years later, she received a phone call from a police department in another city. A new law required all offenders of a certain category to submit DNA. His had matched a series of violent cases in the neighboring city. Brutal, high profile. Every victim between 17 and 23 years old. One survivor had seen tattoos on his arms from behind. He always tied them up. He always covered their eyes. All the victims looked like her. He was convicted again, this time for the rest of his life. She says she knows, intellectually, that what happened to the other women is not her fault. She was used as a witness, her case as evidence of his history and pattern. But she still thinks about it, about what might have happened if she'd been home alone that day, if he'd come during her lunch break instead. She says God was watching over her. She doesn't argue with that. Story 12. The Thing in the Tennessee Woods. He moved his family to rural Tennessee. Deep woods, several thousand acres of untouched forest behind the house. The kind of place where the nights are so loud, cicadas, tree frogs, crickets, that the sound is almost physical. It started the first week. He went to his car one night to retrieve something he'd forgotten. His dog, who goes everywhere with him, who normally treats him as her entire world, refused to step outside. She looked at the open door, looked at him, and backed away. He went alone. The forest noise stopped the moment he stepped outside. Total silence, as if someone had reached over and turned a dial. He walked toward his car. About 10 feet from it, the hairs on the back of his neck lifted. He felt watched. He looked around and saw nothing. Then something moved in the hedge line. He thought rabbit. He'd seen one there earlier, then a rock, the size of a baseball. It hit the walkway beside him and bounced into the shrub. He drew his weapon, called out, waited, nothing. He went back inside. It escalated over the following months. His wife, a woman who, by her own admission, would never voluntarily walk into the woods even in broad daylight, began hearing things. A child crying for help. A baby. A voice that sounded, she was certain, like their son calling out in distress. Each time she was compelled toward the sound with an urgency that alarmed him. Each time he stopped her. Their 3-year-old son, in the driveway one afternoon, wandered out of bounds toward the tree line and pointed into the woods insistently while trying to tell his father something in the incomplete language of a toddler. The floodlights began triggering at night. He would go outside with his shotgun to find the dogs, normally vocal and reactive, hiding with their tails between their legs, silent. Each time, the moment he rounded the far corner of the house, the cicadas and frogs would resume, as if a switch had been flipped. And then came the night he saw it. He was in the driveway with his niece, unloading the car. His dog began growling, staring across the street at his neighbor's property. He followed her gaze, and he saw a large, dark figure moving between the trees, quickly, on all fours. Then it came into open ground and stood up, and walked like a man. It was tall, very tall. But the strangest thing wasn't its height. It was almost transparent. He could see through parts of it, like a shadow given mass, phasing in and out of visibility as it moved, faster than any human could sprint. And it was looking at them. He told his niece to get inside. She didn't listen immediately. When she finally turned toward the woods, she heard a deep, guttural growl and ran. The next morning, they measured the height of the branch she'd seen the figure standing under. 9 feet. Story 13. The Hitchhiker's Trap. She was locked out of her house by a violent boyfriend. No phone, no wallet, no jacket, wearing what she'd had on at a party hours earlier. Freezing cold. Donner Pass Road, of all places. She started walking toward a gas station and motel less than a mile away. A white pickup truck came from the opposite direction, slowed, made a U-turn, pulled alongside her. The man inside asked what she was doing out this late. He showed her what looked like a police badge, said he was just off duty, which was why he was in civilian clothes. He wouldn't pick up hitchhikers, he said, but she didn't look like a hitchhiker. She looked like someone who needed help. He offered her a ride. She said no. He kept pace with the car. Eventually she accepted. Inside, a messy cab, full ashtray, newspapers on the passenger floor, and beneath the papers, she noticed only when her feet shifted them, a pair of handcuffs, coffee cups, empty water bottles, rags, a brightly colored bandana. He introduced himself as John, commented on her clothing. She told him about the party, the fight, the boyfriend. He laughed about arresting him. She asked to use his phone. He said the battery needed saving. They passed the gas station. She said, politely, carefully, that she thought that was her stop. He didn't answer. He drove. When she looked at him, his face was empty, completely blank, glazed, like nobody was home. She watched the gas station lights disappear behind them. Trees closed in on both sides. The road became something private and dark. She started to plan. Could she grab the wheel? Could she jump? She thought about the handcuffs beneath her feet and carefully used her shoes to slide them further under the seat. He pulled off the road. Trees on both sides. Turned the engine off. "Something's wrong with the car," he said flatly. "Get out with me." She grabbed the center console and refused. She cried. She begged. She said she was too cold. And then she used his name. "Please, John, I'm so cold and scared." He stopped, turned back to look at her. Something in his face shifted. She still can't describe what it was. He got back into the car, sat still for a long time, lit a cigarette, stared out the window. At one point, without looking at her, he told her that if she was thinking about running, he had a quick way to get her where he wanted her. She had been thinking about running. Eventually, she asked about his wife and his children. He told her flatly, without emotion, that he didn't have a wife, that his house was empty. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He said, "I'm thinking about what to do with you." Not angry, just cold. That coldness terrified her more than the yelling would have. After a long silence, he started the engine. He drove. Eventually, a gas station appeared ahead. She watched the distance close, watched for the right moment. He slowed, pulled up. "Don't tell anyone," he said. "I was just teaching you a lesson." Before he could finish, she was out of the truck and sprinting. She remembered to look back for the license plate, caught the last 3 digits as he accelerated away. She gave the police everything: description, vehicle, partial plate, his name. They took her statement. She asked to review the security footage. The officer said there was nothing on the cameras. Her case number, she was later told, didn't exist. She never heard anything more. She never hitchhiked again. She still tells herself he was just trying to teach her a lesson. She doesn't believe it. Story 14. The Polar Bear in the Fog. Northern Canada. A man gets a call from a friend. His remote cabin has been broken into. Every window smashed. He loads his snowmobile with boards and tarps, repair materials. Just as he's about to leave, something makes him go back inside and retrieve his rifle. Better safe, he thinks. The ride into the woods begins fine. Then, the sky begins to change. Not a snowstorm, but a rolling wall of fog. Thick, total disorienting fog. The kind that turns familiar trails into corridors you don't recognize. He reaches the cabin, every window destroyed. He unloads his gear and works fast, eyes moving constantly because deep in the fog, he begins to feel watched. Something moves in the trees. He grabs his rifle immediately. Back against the cabin wall. Whatever comes out of that fog, he wants to see it coming. He waits. Nothing emerges. He goes back to work. He finishes. Loads up his snowmobile. Starts the ride home, and then, in the middle of the trail, he sees what look like potholes. He stops. Climbs off. Looks closer. Polar bear tracks. Fresh. Leading directly toward his cabin. The feeling of being watched. The sounds from the tree line. The reason his gut told him to bring the rifle. He had been stalked the entire time he was working by a polar bear. in a fog so thick he would never have seen it coming. A polar bear that had, in all likelihood, also been the one to destroy his cabin in the first place. He says his rifle would have been practically useless against an animal that size, at that distance, and that visibility. He says he feels very lucky to be alive. Story 15. The Voice on the Toy Phone. This story was told secondhand, but the person who heard it believes every word. The year is sometime in the early 1990s. A mother, Tour, 42 years old, 7 children, 3 jobs, no health insurance, deep in the process of divorcing an abusive and absent husband, receives a cancer diagnosis. The outlook is poor. She makes a decision that only a person of extraordinary will could make. She will not fight it. She will spend her remaining energy making sure her children are placed safely. And then she will let go. By the time she is moved into the hospital and placed on a morphine drip, her youngest, not quite 2 years old, is settled with new family members, fed properly, dressed every morning, playing with more toys than he'd ever seen. One afternoon, the boy is in the living room, pulling toys one by one from a chest. His aunt watches from the couch. On the far side of the room is one of those old toy rotary phones. White plastic, smiley face on the dial, a little red receiver. The phone begins to ring. The aunt stares at it. No one is near it. After a moment, the little boy crosses the room, picks up the receiver. "Hi, Mommy, is it time? Okay, I will. I'll be a good boy and listen to Aunt and Uncle. I love you, Mommy." He hangs up, looks at his aunt. "Your turn," he says, and goes back to his toys. The house phone rings. It's the hospital. His mother passed away approximately 5 minutes ago. Whether it was a child's subconscious acting out a goodbye he somehow sensed was coming, whether it was something more than that, whether a soul, in its final moments, reached through whatever barrier separates us and made a toy phone ring so she could say goodbye to her baby. Nobody knows. Nobody ever will. Story 16. The couple at the Sail Inn. She was in her early 20s. Her date, and she went to a bar in West Sacramento to shoot pool. The pool table was taken. A man and a woman playing. They watched for a few minutes. The man noticed her, struck up a conversation. They played together. The man was charming, engaging, asked personal questions. Where did she live? Had she and her date been together long? Did they live together? Odd questions, but softened by easy conversation. She noticed the woman had not said a single word the entire time. When the game ended, the man asked if they'd like to leave with them to visit another bar nearby. Her date began to respond. She cut him off. "No thanks. We have dinner plans." They grabbed their things and left. By the time they reached her truck, the hair on the back of her neck was standing. She told her date she had gotten a horrible feeling from those people. That something was wrong. He thought she might be overreacting. A few days later, she opened the afternoon newspaper. A woman from West Sacramento had been found murdered. She didn't think much of it until she turned the page and saw the photograph. The beautiful, engaging bartender from the Sail Inn, kidnapped and killed the exact night she'd been there. A month later, a man and woman were arrested for the bartender's murder and several other murders. Couples primarily, 4 of them. On the front page of the Sacramento Bee, photographs of Gerald and Charlene Gallego, the couple who had invited her and her date to another bar. She sat with that for a long time. Relief, guilt, the knowledge that they had been selected, chosen, and that when she declined, the killers simply looked for another target. She has carried both feelings her entire life. She says intellectually she knows it isn't her fault, but she has never fully let go of the thought. Had that bartender been able to live out her life, how different would the world have been? These stories are real. The people who lived them are real. And every single one of them will tell you the same thing, that nothing in a horror film has ever matched the specific quality of terror that comes from ordinary life suddenly revealing something wrong beneath the surface. The man at the window, the knock on Christmas morning, the sound of footsteps in an empty attic, the moment a car drives past the gas station and keeps going. Your gut knows before your brain does. Every single person in tonight's accounts, the ones who survived, listened to that instinct, even when it seemed irrational, even when they couldn't explain it. Trust your gut, stay alert. And before you go, drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We have listeners from every continent, and we want to know exactly how far these stories are traveling. If you're new to NeuroFear HQ, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. We release new content regularly, and these stories only get darker. Like this video if it kept you up. And share it with someone who thinks they don't scare easily. This has been NeuroFear HQ. Sleep well, if you can.